So if you're wanting to make some form changes in archery, there are a few things that you need to make sure you keep in mind. A few things to look out for, and some things to understand on how it progresses when making form changes in the sport of archery. So that way you have a better understanding and a better outlook, a more healthy outlook on making form changes when shooting archery. So this will be the second video within the NTS or the KSL shot cycle video. I've had a lot of questions in that first video of what are the acronyms that I'm using. I probably should have explained that, my bad on that one. The NTS is the National Training System for USA Archery. That means it's the style of form that they teach standardized across the vast majority of the coaching style, especially for recurve and barbell compound, not so much. And then also the KSL shot cycle is my coach, Ki-Sik Lee. He's Korean. That's his name, and those are his initials. That's why it's the KSL shot cycle. So anyway, that aside, this is the second part to the series that I'm going to be working on, taking you through form progressions in those shooting styles that are the same thing. They're just different names for the same thing. And I'm basically just going to take you through progressions of beginner levels through, intermediate into advanced levels. But before we get really too far into the meat and potatoes of how to actually start integrating the shot style, I figured I know that I have to give this preface before we really even start much of anything, because this is a super common thing, a super common question that I get all the time, and it's something I always give as a bit of a disclaimer to all the students that I work with, as well as all the other people just looking for advice. Now, you might have found this video because you're making form changes yourself. You don't have to be using the form system I'm using, because this applies to every style of shooting, every way that you go to shoot archery. When you start to integrate form changes into your system, into whatever you're doing, you need to look out for a few different things. Not necessarily things that are going to get you hurt. That is a potential, and we'll talk about that. But more or less what you expect as a shooter, as an individual human, how to deal with form changes and what it's going to take. So the first thing I'm going to say as a bit of a disclaimer, in order to protect yourself from potential injury, some potential future injury, especially when you're making complex form changes and doing specific movements for the very first time, you may not be in as strong a shape as you think you are. Especially when it comes to the small, tiny little muscles that are within the shoulder that control a lot more than you even realize. Because when you go to start doing different complex movements, say to draw from this way, to drawing more high, to drawing lower, to becoming more round, or whatever it is, just doing different things, you're using different muscles, potentially in that manner for the very first time, at least that you are aware of. So going to a lighter bow is always a great option. It's always the smartest and safest option. And right here, this is actually my wife's bow. These are probably 20-pound limbs, somewhere in that neighborhood. Very lightweight. I like to use this bow for demonstration purposes because it's just so easy to work with. I do have some bows up here on the top of the shelf behind me. Those are very, very light bows with I think like 15-pound limbs. Those are the best types of equipment to grab when you're wanting to start making form changes. Not necessarily to actually shoot this bow, I'm not going to be shooting it, but I'm going to mimic doing the actual form that I want to with it, because again, I may not be used to using those muscles, and it may not feel right, and I may not do it right. And when you don't do it right, and you do it the wrong way, in a way that could potentially lead to injury, lighter bows are always safer, especially for the shoulders and other very intricate parts of the body. Now, something even lighter than this would be a stretch band. I don't have one handy right now, but it's a very light piece of TheraBand, basically. Usually it's in the yellow color. Yellow is a very, very light version, or even red, somewhere in that range. All the ones that are typically gray or black are much heavier. TheraBand is a popular name brand of stretch bands, basically. And you can use a stretch band as a bow and mimic the shot cycle and the shot process and whatever you're working on. The lighter colors are lighter in weight, the darker colors are heavier in weight, and they usually use a system like that to follow. So always go with the lighter one because you're working on form, you're working on changes, you're not working on strengthening. Now when you're gonna go stronger and you wanna get a lot of extra bow weight in, go with the heavier, the black bands, the gray bands, things like that, and that'll actually give you some good resistance to do some decent training in regards to physical strength. When you're making major changes, going down in draw weight is much safer, and it's a lot easier for your body to learn these things because some of the movements, especially as we get through later in this series, it will become more and more complex as time goes on. So you may need to go down in draw weight or use a different light bow like the one up there or this one or a stretch band, and it'll be safer. So outside of going down in draw weight to basically protect the muscles in your shoulders and stuff like that, also it enhances the ability for you to control the bow itself. Because when you're doing different movements that you're not comfortable with, you're actually like literally carving a new path forward in your life. So something that's really cool about the brain and the muscles is it's connected through a neuromotor pathway basically. And through a process called proprioception, you actually strengthen the connection between the brain and the muscle in a specific movement that you're doing. And if you have an old habit of doing something and you go to do something new, you're not going to be able to do it easily without really hyper focusing on that movement. So another tip is when you're doing something, especially making a large form change, you have to focus a lot more on that specific movement than you normally would in the past. Say if I say something as simple as anchor. How do you come into anchor? Well, okay, I draw my bow back and I anchor. Okay, cool. How do you anchor in regards to keeping the tension in your back that you've loaded into your back as you started to draw back the bow into anchor? Do you keep all of that tension in your back when you come up into anchor, or do you lose some of it? And most people would be like, well, I don't know because I've never focused on that. Well, that's why you may need to focus a little bit harder in some areas than others, especially when you're making a form change in that specific way. Because if I say, okay, make sure I maintain my back tension as I load, that is something as simple as lock it into position and load. Don't lose position. You'll see that this elbow doesn't move. People that lose their back tension when they come into anchor will come here and they lose the tension. You'll see that I've actually shortened my draw length as I came up into anchor. That's exaggerated, but that's what does happen over time. So if I say, okay, keep it, anchor. Keep it, anchor. And now I say, okay, I'm gonna start aiming. Aiming, I'm paying attention because I'm being careful, I'm distracted. I'm no longer focused on just the movement that I'm doing. I added something else, a distraction of aiming in, and I lost what I was starting to change, right? That is normal. That is part of the process. You don't have that habit of the new way yet. That connection is not stronger than the older connection, and so that older connection will always take over in default until this one is stronger than this one. So it's normal to be working on one thing, then think about something else and lose the thing you already had mastered or thought you did because old habits revert back. And then there's this juggling back and forth, and there's this always constant progression among different habits, different thoughts, different processes until you get that one down that is bigger and stronger than the old one. That old one will always want to have a tendency to take over. Now, when you add pressure, like a tournament, shooting with your buddies, shooting in front of your coach, you start to tend to revert back to the old way, and that's normal. It's frustrating. I've been there. I've done it. I can't tell you how many times I was so angry and frustration because my body wouldn't listen to my brain. It just took time, it took effort, and it took far too many shots than I'm willing to tell you, because I don't want you to just turn off this video and put down your bow forever and never come back, because it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. There is a great book that I can recommend. It's called The Talent Code. I will have links in the description below for both the book on Amazon as well as the audio book. And it's just a really good insight into how the brain and the muscles work together to make connections to do something better and better. And if you're serious about getting better at the sport of archery or any other thing in the world, check it out. It just kind of highlights what it takes and how much effort and energy it requires to really carve a strong pathway in the woods, which your brain basically is, to make a nice, good paved path to be easy to walk down. Another thing to be aware of is your perception of what you're doing is not always accurate. So I'll give you a very specific example here. As I go to draw back, I will pull back a whole lot and I won't push very much, and I'll be in a position in my overall body where it is not ideal. I'll be leaning back, and you can see how at full draw here, I've got a bit of a lean going on here. And most people will do this for various different reasons. We won't get into the specifics in this video. I'll talk about it in a later video. If you're interested in that, subscribe and do hit the notification bell because that stuff's coming. But in order to go from here to here, more upright, how you should be, my feeling is totally different. If I had shot thousands of arrows this way and shot for years with a lean back, for me to actually be upright, I'm not gonna feel like I'm upright. I'm actually going to feel like I'm like this, like I'm leaning forward, because my body and my brain says, this is straight, but it's not. This is straight, but it feels like I'm falling over forwards. That is normal, that is expected, that is common. I've had to do that. Everybody who has made form changes in archery has had that feeling one way, shape, or form or another. The fourth thing that I wanted to really talk about today is that it takes time, it takes effort, it takes dedication, and it isn't easy. But nothing good comes to anybody that is easy. Everything that is worth it requires work. In order for the payoff to happen, you have to put in your time, you have to put in your effort, you have to pay your dues, and it'll pay off if you have the focus and the determination to overcome it. So why am I telling you this? Because I can tell you it takes a long time to make form changes. If you're new and you've gotten into this not that long ago and you haven't shot that many arrows and you haven't had a system, that's probably a better thing than being somebody who's 50, 60, 70 years old and have done it the same way for decades. You can teach an old dog new tricks, but it takes a lot more time to teach them that trick as opposed to a new puppy. Puppies learn fast and easy because they want to please their humans, right? They want to do the right thing, they want to get that reward, they want to get that payoff of the pet and the praise. So it's easy to teach them because they're fresh, they're new. They don't have decades of potential abuse or something like that. If you got a dog out of a shelter, you'll understand what I'm talking about. I've been there, done that, and sometimes they're the best pets, but it's an old dog and it takes some time to teach it some new tricks. So doing the right thing, doing the thing that you want to do, even if it's right or wrong, who knows, who's to say what's right or wrong. But if you're wanting to make form changes, you're wanting to change your ways, it takes time. It takes a lot more time than people are willing to admit because it's tough, it's hard, and nobody wants to be the bearer of bad news. But I'm gonna be honest, I'm gonna tell you, it takes way more time and effort than I was willing to admit, because I'll tell you my story briefly. Grew up Western New York, started shooting arrows at 6, shot compound for 6 years, switched to recurve at 12, shot until I was 18. I had no system other than the old school NAA 9 steps to the 10 ring, shoot like the letter T, basic follow through, nothing really important. My shot sequence was literally draw back, look at the middle, and wait. I would wait until the clicker clicked, and once it clicked, I'd shoot. That's it. That was my shot cycle. I would also say, I'm gonna win. I'm gonna shoot a 10. I'm gonna pound him in the middle. I'm gonna beat this guy. I mean, that was it. I had no method. Not, I hook this way. I hold the grip this way. I look like this. I raise the bow. I rotate. I draw with my shoulder. Nothing. Nothing. No system. And it still took me from 2006 to 2010 shooting on average 350 arrows 6 days a week to get back to where I was when I first showed up to make form changes. I may be an outlier, meaning somebody who adopted it far too slowly somehow and had more struggles than others. My brain works in ways that are messed up, but that's part of the reason why this channel exists and why I can share this information to you, is because I need to know so much more information in order to wrap my brain around it. But the benefit is you guys get to reap from it because I can explain it to you in a very different way than most people. So I guess things work out in the long run. Again, going back to nothing worthwhile is easy. It's very hard. I can't tell you how many arrows I shot. I can't tell you how many times I had frustration. I can't tell you how many times I wanted to quit. how many times I wanted to stop, but I had a goal, and I achieved that goal of becoming an Olympian, and I had the bonus of bringing home some medals, some hardware. So I can't complain. It was worth it, but I had that staying power. I had it in my head. I had that expectation, that healthy expectation of it's going to take time. I have to have faith in the process, and I have to keep pushing, 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 and it will work out. It will click. But it's not easy, and it takes time. I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm going to shoot straight with you guys, and I'm going to tell you how it is. I'm not going to lie. I don't mean to sound like a Debbie Downer. I don't mean to at all take the wind out of your sails. Just know it's going to take some serious time and some serious focus to make form changes. Now, if you're wanting to do this for fun in your backyard and just be better, it's good to do that too. You don't have to be super hyper dedicated at all by any means. But if you want to be a little bit better than what you could be, if you didn't focus very much and just were flinging arrows, then I'm your guy and I can help you out and I can give you some insights on how to move forward as well as what to expect. Because if you don't have a healthy expectation and I tell you, hey, do this form change and you can't get it, the first time you try it, you might put your bow down in frustration and give up and walk away. So I figured this would be a really healthy addition to that first video where I started with this series. By the way, if you haven't seen that video, I have links in the description below and a card at the top up there. Actually, I'll just put it for the whole playlist, but it'll start with that video. And if you're interested, consider supporting this channel. I have a Patreon, I have a YouTube membership page, I have a PayPal donate button on my website, I have a PO box you can send some things to. That also includes stuff I'll review on the channel and potentially you'll see featured on this channel. All of those other ways to support this channel, I'm trying to get out more content sooner than later, so you'll have early access to those videos through the membership, YouTube membership page, as well as a Patreon page. So consider joining those and supporting this channel because, again, I'm producing this content for free for everybody in the world to enjoy and to benefit from. Because I didn't have this when I was 12 years old when I switched to Recurve, and if I did, I wouldn't have struggled so much and questioned so much of my own existence from 2006 to 2010. It would have been a much easier transition, potentially even 2011. It was a long time, 4 or 5 years of struggle because I had no system. I had no idea. There was nobody doing this. Everything was hidden. Everything was secret, and you had to pay to play, and I think it's a shame. So this is why I'm doing it, and I hope this is helping.